guys, welcome back to The Bargain Collector. I'm Josh the Ramon Thinney. Come on in, kick your feet up, hit the like, and definitely subscribe. So the last time we were here together, I was talking about two library finds that I'd scooped up. One was a 4K, which was Lincoln Lawyer. The other was a Blu-ray, and it was still sealed in the cellophane, and it was Barbarella, Queen of the Galaxy. Today, we're going to speak about the one that I bought for $1, the Lincoln Lawyer on 4K. So first things first, when I popped in the Lincoln Lawyer, there were things I immediately noticed about the image quality, and it didn't necessarily impress. I would say that it is on a BD66 disc, but I don't think that's the actual issue with the film. When I dug a little bit deeper, what I found was that this was a 2K intermediate. So they had shot the film, scanned it in 2K, and they upscaled it. So the image is not it's not a native 4K scan. So in many instances, I can see, like I popped in the Blu-ray as well. And while I did notice an uptick, it was a very minimal uptick in resolution and visual quality overall between the two. And that could be due to the fact that the way that it was shot was a very gritty and kind of low rent feel. That's what they were going for. And they definitely achieved it. So it's not a knock on the creative choice. I feel that it certainly captured what it was looking to. It just doesn't translate well to an HDR, 4K format. It doesn't bring out the best. It's not going to shine. It's not there. You wouldn't put this on as being something that's anywhere near reference quality. Does that make sense? And what was the critical response of the Lincoln Lawyer? Largely, critics have been pretty positive about the Lincoln Lawyer. It still right now hovers around at 84% on Rotten Tomatoes, and I feel like it is well-deserved. And they started to call it the McConaughey Renaissance era, and it was largely because up until this point, he had been doing rom-com after rom-com. He had kind of become the go-to guy for that. He had done Ghost of Girlfriends Past with Jennifer Garner. He'd done Fool's Gold with Kate Hudson. Failure to Launch with Sarah Jessica Parker. I always want to call her Sarah Jessica Parker, but Sarah Jessica Parker. He did those films with them, and it was kind of back to back to back. And so this was his foray back into serious dramatic acting and something that's along the lines of a kind of a thriller, actually. And critics fell in love with what they called his natural overconfident swagger, which they felt was very, very apropos for the character that he was playing. And I can certainly understand where they were coming from at that time. I said it before when I was talking about the movies when I found them. Matthew McConaughey, to say that this is one of his best performances in years, it's a very interesting comment, because I found him in every movie that he's in. Either he's the best actor in the movie or he's the most interesting, but he's always one or the other, and sometimes both. So to say that his confident swagger is the thing that was very perfect for this role, I feel that there's more to it than just that. I think he puts on the super confident swagger. While that may feel natural in the film, if you look at all of his films, he doesn't walk around with an overconfident swagger, because I think that that's just something he can turn on at some point if he needs to, because he's an actor. Another high praise that the film received was how fast-paced it was. And I would agree. It was pretty fast-paced. It never really gave you time to think too much about what was going on, which is really good, because in a film like this, a legal drama is very difficult unless you come from a legal background, because there's lots of things that people do in legal dramas that you're like, a person who knows anything about law is going to say, that there's no way that you start to call out things. But because the film does move so fast, you don't get a chance to call out anything. But there were some things where I was like, it doesn't really work like that in court. But it doesn't matter because essentially, it's a movie. And second, it's moving along so fast that you don't get to catch it before you moved on to something else that has your attention. As you start to go through the special features and take a look at everything, there were some really cool facts that I learned about the film. One of them being the author of the book and for which the film is based on, Michael Connelly, when he was asked who he wanted to play the character, he pushed for Matthew McConaughey. He said Matthew McConaughey was the guy who he saw playing this role. Now, every time anybody writes something, myself included, I have an idea of who I want to play the character. And it's largely based upon what I've seen them in that kind of fits the bill, or if I'm trying to play them against type or whatever. But here was the funny part, is that it wasn't based around like A Time to Kill when he played a lawyer or something like that. He he wanted Matthew McConaughey to play the part in this movie based on what he saw him play in Tropic Thunder.
Hey, how's the adoption thing coming, buddy?
I feel like all the good ones are gone.
Well, at least you get to choose yours. I'm stuck with mine. Tell you what, get back to work, genius soldier. The Pecker's on a TiVo mission for the YOU. Work on those tears, my man.
All right, yeah.
Say it for me one time. You make me happy.
Happy.
Love you, buddy.
I thought that was hilarious. I love you, buddy. Another thing too was that I learned that Phillippe, he had to audition for this role. They did not offer it to him. He auditioned just like everybody else. And I think he even said that there were like 200 other actors that they were looking at. And he stepped into the room and auditioned just like everyone else, had callbacks and had to go through the whole process to get cast in a movie. And this was at a time when he was riding pretty high. So now we're on to my thoughts about the film. The thing is that the script, the film overall is a very simple story. It is a client who's accused of something that he didn't do. He's accused of something for which he refuses to plea at all. He will not plea bargain. He will not negotiate. He wants to go to trial. And he wants to uphold his family name. And Matthew McConaughey is tasked with doing the impossible because essentially it looks as though the DA has Ryan Phillippe's character dead to rights. With a simple premise like that, the film does wonders with it. It really does. Again, as I said, I was thoroughly entertained. I was impressed by, again, the performances. I was impressed by how tight the story was so that it didn't wander all over the place. It had a very straight through line, and surprises would come around the corners and kind of, whoa, hey, didn't see that coming. It had lots of surprises. Things that made me second guess. Is Ryan Phillippe guilty? Is he innocent? Is there someone who's framing him? Are there people who are doing this to get to his money because he's very wealthy? Are they trying to get back at his mom because you find out that there's this thing that has happened to Frances Fisher's character in the past? Was this tied into that? It gave you so many things to think about. And I was very appreciative for both the writer and the director having the ability to pull you in and keep you there throughout the entire runtime and leave you guessing, because then it isn't even about the the complications that come along the way. It's also about, well, now they have to go to trial, and you as the audience are aware of all these things that Matthew McConaughey can't introduce into court. And his wife is a, or I can't say wife, but his love interest, Marisa Tomei, she could help him if he would just tell her the information, but it's attorney-client privilege, so he can't tell her either. And it does present a lot of ethical questions about how to handle a situation like this. It was great for all of those things. The movie, when it finally hit its stride and it got away from him being overconfident and all that, past all that stuff, the movie really kicked it into another gear. So I mean, I would say that an 84% Rotten Tomatoes score, I can dig that, actually. I can see it makes complete sense. I would say it's appropriate. The Lincoln Lawyer on 4K UHD. Is this a film I'd want to add to my very limited library? Well, let's talk about it. First things first, shelf appeal. I mean, it's a pretty standard Blu-ray. I do like the artwork, but it's a very standard 4K case, right? It's not too bad. I can really wipe the $1 off kind of thing there. I can wipe that off. But overall, it's very plain. There's no real shelf appeal to it. But did I find it entertaining? Yeah, I did. I felt that most of the elements of the film worked. The film was very tight. The performances were incredible by everybody. I can't think of a single person who was a weak link. Even the chauffeur driver, I don't know his name. I know he's a very prominent actor, but even his performance was pretty well for the very limited amount of stuff they had him do. Yeah, I felt all the performances worked. I felt the story was very good. While not original, they told it in a way that kind of was. So overall, very entertaining, very entertaining. But is it rewatchable? That's where it gets weird, because I feel like so much of the story works, and I feel like all these twists and turns that come out of nowhere, they work. I don't feel as though if you go back and rewatch, knowing what's coming, knowing the fate of all the different characters involved, I don't know if I would have as much fun on a rewatch of the film. Does that make sense? Because what made the film so engaging was finding out all these new bits of information. I don't know how much fun I would have on a second viewing, or third, or fourth, or fifth, because essentially that's why I'd be adding the film to my library, would be if I could foresee myself having fun on future watches. And I don't know if I would have that much fun. So I'm probably going to say no, I probably wouldn't rewatch this one. So to recap, shelf appeal, nah, not so great on that. But entertaining, yes. If you like Matthew McConaughey, you like courtroom procedures, you like a guy with a ton of swagger, and if you dig that kind of stuff, you're gonna love the film. It is a great film. I never watched the TV show, but they said that the TV show stays pretty faithful to the film. If you love the TV show, you'll love the film, and vice versa. I just feel like for me, it's not rewatchable, So therefore, I won't be adding this one to my very limited library. My next review is going to be for Barbarella, Queen of the Galaxy, which I also picked up during my library haul with this one. That one's going to be dropping on Friday, so definitely come back and check that one out. But until then, keep finding good movies at great prices.